It's true. There's a degradation of freedom over time, and little bit by little bit, we're losing it. And I don't want to see us become this country of sheep.
Hey everyone, Sawyer Smith here, and I have the distinct privilege today of speaking with Taya Kyle, American wife, married to Chris Kyle, the American sniper. She's carrying on his legacy and standing up for what she believes in, just as he did so honorably in his military career. Taya, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we are here in Texas today, near your hometown, and I want to just start by asking you, how do you feel about all the new gun laws? You're a gun advocate, Second Amendment supporter. How do you feel about open carry in 2016?
I don't actually have too much of an opinion on it. I think if I am recalling correctly, I think Arizona has open carry, I think. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, hardly anybody does that. Mm-hmm. Usually people carry concealed anyway, so I don't know that it'll change a whole lot of things here. I'm sure there are people that are happy about it, people that aren't, but I don't think it's going to change a whole lot.
Do you have an opinion about campus carry on the college campuses, the public universities subscribing to that new policy that'll take effect later this year?
That's a hard one for me. Brian Birdwell, the Birdwells are friends of mine, and I know he championed that, and I think there are some really good ideas behind it, and I know that some of our biggest fears are that gunmen, people who want to do terror, or people just who want their story known, feel like they can go into an area where nobody's carrying and shoot people up, and there's no threat to themselves. And I think that's kind of a common thread. Most of the people who are committing these mass shootings are going to places where they don't feel they'll be hurt, and that's true of the person who murdered Chris and Chad too. There were opportunities he thought about before, but he didn't want to get hurt in the process, and so he waited for the right time. So I think that while on the one hand it feels a little bit uncomfortable to think of really young adults having weapons and not having fully developed their judgment, that's on the one side. And then I go to the other side and I look at places like Israel where they've had a shooter come in and the students are all armed and they know how to use their weapon, and the shooter doesn't take one life because there are enough people that can defend and protect the other students. I don't think that we're ever going to be in a situation where all students are carrying, and that's good. I don't think we need that. But perhaps the biggest thing is the threat to a shooter that there might be someone carrying that can take them out. And I think that alone could prevent, hopefully, some mass shootings. You just have to trust that people are responsible with their weapons and they know what they're doing, and they have to take a class to get their CHL, just like everybody else. They have to go through training. And I do have faith I have a lot of faith, actually. There's not any person I can think of that's sane who wants to murder another human being. Even our spec op guys don't want to do that. They only kill if they have to. And so when you talk about murder, I'm not worried about our college kids suddenly being murderers or having a thirst for murder just because they have a gun. So the biggest issue then would be safety. We just want them to be safe and responsible, and I think that's possible.
That roll of the dice is preferred. It's taking the chances that there's going to be better use of the guns for defense purposes than the chances of somebody becoming a killer, and wreaking havoc on a campus or something. Right. Do you carry a weapon?
I do.
You do? Who taught you how to shoot?
Well, a lot of people think it was Chris, but when I first met Chris, and I knew people that had guns. My dad was a hunter, he was a Marine. I didn't have any problem with it, but I told him in the beginning when he was deployed, he didn't have to teach me how to shoot, because I would do it for target practice. It was fun to do that, but I told him if somebody broke into our house, I would jump out a window, I would run, I would not be able to kill, even in self-defense. Mm-hmm. And then I have my son, and I was on, teach me how to shoot, teach me how to protect and defend our kids and myself. So having said all of that, there was very little time that Chris spent teaching me, because when he was deployed, some of his friends taught me. And then I've learned a lot from a good friend of mine, Chief Bill Wayburn. He's helped me a lot. He's who taught me in my CHL course. And then there was a trainer, Sam Moore, who taught me a whole bunch out of Elm Fork Shooting Range in Dallas. So
just a few nights ago, millions of Americans saw you on CNN for the town hall on gun violence. You more or less stood up to President Obama with your question. What did that feel like? What did you feel from that?
It was nerve-wracking going into that situation for a couple of reasons. One is just that and I think primarily it's that it was so emotionally charged for so many people, and everybody in that room lost somebody that they loved due to violence, and mostly it was murder. And so to go in and have a view that I think is not too horrible, not too far out there, not too offensive, but knowing that other people out there might take offense on a very personal level because of their loss, I think it was really nerve-wracking for me to do that.
Sure. And
I do find that, there's this tendency when people lose someone they love, they want an answer why. They want to know, what could they have done differently? Did they miss something along the way? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's normal, even if it was a disease state that took a loved one. You just think, is there anything we could have done? And so it's a really sensitive issue, because if somebody believes that a background check of some kind would have saved their loved one from the murder doing what they did, that's a hard thing, And I had people come up after me, talk to me afterward, a couple of people, and they were very respectful and very nice, but they did feel that although their loved one was killed by somebody who did go through a background check, I think the wait period wasn't long enough, and it was domestic violence. So you get into the what ifs, and I could also bring up some pretty powerful statistics of the murders and domestic violence that happen all over this world, and Australia in particular. It's done by machete and some really horrible things. So does it stop someone?
Right.
I don't know, but could it have stopped theirs? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know, because at the end of the day, it still takes somebody who has the heart and mind to kill someone like that. I think for most of us, if we really think about it, how many people do we know that could not just say, "Oh, I wish that person was dead," or which is bad enough, but or I wish that person would disappear or something, but to actually think of themselves pulling the trigger on another human being, that's a mentally ill person. Even if it's not a standard mental illness, it's a highly dysfunctional person at best. And also I think it's just a person who chooses evil.
So you suggested to President Obama with your question that more laws restricting gun ownership in opposition to groups like the NRA isn't the answer for this crazy violence. What is the answer? Is it more people carrying guns? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that the main point that I wanted to make is really that I've heard there are 33,000 gun laws on the books today, and it's not stopping. It's not prohibiting people from doing evil acts. That's just one thing. The other thing is that there's only a 40% prosecution rate of our federal government for federal gun crimes, and that's things like lying on background checks. And so I didn't have the time in that setting to make any suggestions, and I don't know if my suggestions would help anything either, but I think the main point of that is making a new law when we're not enforcing the ones we have seems futile. Why not instead, why not try to have 100% prosecution rate, first of all, on people who break those gun laws that we have. And if you're caught lying on a background check, prison time, no questions asked, and no parole. There's no reason to lie on a background check, the ones that we already have. And so I feel like some of those things would give us more results than just making another law that we may or may not enforce.
Sure.
And you get people more angry when you give them more laws for responsible people who are already following them and already seeing that it's not helping. And so just to find the peace and the common ground, I think, is to really make an effort to use the laws that we have, to use the system that we have in place for the background checks, not do something more stringent and then not prosecute.
Right.
Just because all that does is make it more stringent on the people that are already following the laws. So I would say I would love to see them go hard and heavy on the people that are breaking the laws that we have and see if that makes a difference first.
During your question and during President Obama's response to you, there's talk of this correlation, if there is one at all, that exists between the lowest rates of violent crime in our history, in our country's history, and the highest levels of gun ownership in our country's history. He said that he didn't know if there was a one-to-one correlation. I'm guessing you feel that there is.
Actually, I don't even know if there is a one-to-one correlation. I really don't. But I think the point of bringing that up is to say that there are fears all around. And I feel as a leader too, it'd be nice to help people look at what's going well and saying people that don't like others to have guns, you maybe don't have to be as afraid as you think you do, because we're at an all-time high of gun ownership and an all-time low of murder rates. And so even if you take the murder rate out of it and just say we're at an all-time high and you're still safe, you're still okay, that I think gives hope to people that maybe our country isn't in this horrible situation. We don't have to be so hateful toward each other about this whole issue. And the other side of it is that murder rates are at an all-time low. So no matter who you are, I think we're all at this level of discomfort because we hear about these horrific mass shootings and we worry about our kids or our family members in a hospital. They're going to places that we don't expect it, in a church, a hospital, a school. So I think it's also really helpful to everyone to know that we're in a situation that we need to address, but we're not going down the proverbial toilet with violence in this country. We're just not.
You were saying, why not celebrate the facts instead of this false sense of hope that is being spread everywhere? For those that didn't get a chance to see the town hall, just recap. What was the message you wanted all those viewers to go to sleep with that night?
I think the message that I wanted, if I could convey anything to people, was that America is not in this horrible, lawless, murderous state where the world is falling apart and people are crazy. It feels like that because we have, of course, 9/11, we have Boston Marathon, San Bernardino shootings, Sandy Hook, things like that. When you hear about them, it's so horrifying. You almost think, what is wrong with our world? And we can very easily lose sight of the fact that our murder rates are at an all-time low and our gun ownership is at an all-time high, which maybe they're not correlated exactly, but what I would say is that does that not give us all hope in the American people that we as a people are doing really well? There are some segments that are troublesome. We do have to keep an eye on terrorism, 100%. We do have to keep an eye on people who are taking mind-altering drugs and acting out in a way that is so far away from anything they might have done sober. We do have an issue with accountability in the schools. And if kids are starting to go south, wouldn't it be great if parents came to the school and said, my kid has a problem, tell me about it. Instead of, my kid's not the problem, I'll sue you. Those kind of things I think would be maybe areas of focus. But having said all that, I would still go back to those rates. And I guess as the more I thought about everything and the multiple ways we could look at it and things we could address, it all boiled down to we're still in a really good place. And we need to be able to stand up to what other people think of us as a country and what we fear when we turn on the nightly news every night. We need to have some nugget of reality that tells us we're a really good country full of really amazing people who want what's best for each other and are still neighborly and are responsible.
I love that you're so passionate about this issue and, guns in general. Outside of the military, was Chris's your husband's passion for guns the same as yours, or maybe not for guns, but for Second Amendment rights, for that freedom to carry a weapon for self-defense, so on and so forth?
And I appreciate you actually making that differentiation too, because I feel like somewhere along this last week I was thinking, I don't know if I'm so much a gun advocate as I am a freedom advocate. Mm-hmm. And yes, I want the right to carry my gun. I already have that right. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel too prohibited at this point, but I am a big fan of our freedoms not being taken away. I remember my grandfather at one point, he said, this was probably 50 years ago, he said, you kids, and he was talking to his adult children and grandkids, have no idea what true freedom really is. Wow. You have no idea. And I thought, you know what? It's true. There's a degradation of freedom over time, and little bit by little bit we're losing it. And I don't want to see us become this country of sheep. You know, I want to see us, I feel like when you give people, you empower them, you give them the opportunity to have courage, to stand up. And so I do like that hope part of it, that freedom part of it. And Chris definitely did. He 100% believed that people are capable, trustworthy. He loved the idea that we could be a free people because he saw what happened with people who were empowered. And especially, I think, in the military, you get a view of just such a variety of different people from so many different backgrounds. And they could be trusted with all of these things. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say it's a perfect mix, but it's a good cross-section of the country. And so I think that you could see we've all been able to come together and do something good for this country. And so he definitely was a big proponent of not having our freedoms being taken away.
You're a mother of 2 children and been a military wife. You've been through so much, and from doing interviews to speaking engagements, Hollywood movies, writing books. At the end of the day, you didn't ask for any of this. It was just sort of dropped on top of you, given the circumstances. How has it been handling it all? What is it like to carry that going forward?
You know, it's an interesting question because I sometimes look at my life and wonder, in the big scheme of things, what's happened, in the minutia, what's happened. And I think at the end of the day, we're all just asked by God to do what we can do with what we're given and to keep having faith. And so I find that although I struggle sometimes in how to get things done, but everything from the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation to the work projects, everything, I feel God has put a person in place to help. I've never had to do any of it alone. And I've never had to even seek out all the people that I needed to help. So for me, that's part of it, is going to God in prayer and trying to see, is this a good thing, and if or not? Mm-hmm. And if it can be done, I feel overwhelmed. I don't know that I can do it. And it turns out with a little patience, mm-hmm. I think things are in God's time, not our time. Somebody will show up, the right person will show up. And I've learned a lot in Chris's death about not just pushing through, not just having one thing that I think is important and then just, hitting my head against the wall or doing whatever I have to do until it finally breaks and I push through, but rather to say, I'm going to pray about it. And if it's not all coming together right now, maybe now is not the right time. Mm-hmm. And what is the right time? What is in front of me? What can I do? So I think that's probably been the biggest lesson and the only reason I've been able to accomplish what I have, is that I have good people around me, and they've sort of shown up, and not because I've had to necessarily seek them all out.
You mentioned God, and you and Chris were both strong people of faith. And like I mentioned, you guys went through a lot together when he was deployed overseas on 4 different tours. Since his death in 2013, I'm sure you've relied on your faith. Can you talk about what role your faith played when you guys were apart and in grieving losing Chris?
Yeah, faith is something that in my life has been a major theme. And I grew up in an Episcopal church, and I felt very close to God growing up. And there were times in my life where it just wasn't as big a part. It's not that I didn't believe. I just didn't go to God as much. And even today, I think I was just thinking about it this morning, actually, about how when things are really stressful, what can I do? And I did it with the town hall meeting. I was very stressed trying to think through all the different issues and come to some sort of conclusion that meant anything at all. And there's so many, for every one thing you could think on any side of this issue, there's another thing that you come back to. And I just wanted to think of something real that it was sort of the boiled down version of everything. And it wasn't until the morning I was flying out to Washington, D.C., and I started praying. And I prayed to God, please either give me something good to say, meaning something that will matter, or don't give me an opportunity to speak. And it was during that plane flight, and I asked a couple other people to pray for the same thing for me, that I started thinking of hope and where are we really in this country. And so I felt like that was a powerful lesson for me, that again, I can say we should go to God, and I know that, but every once in a while something happens. This invitation to come speak at the town hall meeting happened very quickly. I do have kids. I do have other things going on. So there were a lot of moving parts that needed to change to make it. And I got so wrapped up in that I forgot to really ask God for his view and what he would want me to say, or what opportunity I might have. I'm not saying necessarily that I always get it right or that I always hear the right thing, but to at least do that gut check and to pray about it, I find really helpful. And in fact, like I said, it helped me with this one. And maybe that's why the statement wasn't so much about having the answer for everybody, but to just remember that we're all doing okay. Maybe that's the reason that we go to prayer, is because it kind of puts it in perspective. I've noticed that the more broken I am, the more that at some point I can muddle my way through it, but it always comes back to God. And so that's been my big lesson of faith through all of it. And through the grieving process too, I can tell you that if I didn't believe in life after death, if I didn't believe that I would see Chris again, I would not be doing anything I'm doing today. I really don't. I don't know that I would get out of bed, and I don't know that I'd be able to be a good mother to my children. And so it's that hope that I get from that is paramount. And then everything under that is still better with faith.
Well, I think people know about yours and Chris's faith. They certainly know about his heroism and his story as they've seen it in the movie and in the books. If there were something you wanted to share with everyone about Chris that they maybe don't know, what would that be?
It was one of the reasons that I wrote American Wife, was to share more of Chris that I didn't feel would necessarily violate his privacy, because it really showed the man that he was in a full, well-rounded view as a father, as a husband, as a person, as well as, like you said, the man of faith and the hero that everybody knew him to be. I think that one thing that's hard to get across in books and movies is the playful nature that he had. And so there was something that most people who knew Chris would tell you, that there was it changed the energy in a room when he was in it. He did have a larger than life presence. And the interesting thing about that is that he had this larger than life presence in just being just an aw shucks, humble, whatever guy, real laid back, and yet the energy changed. And so that's a powerful thing. I feel a lot of people were taken aback when they met him, to say, here's this guy who could be a lot of different things. He's very capable of being a lot of different things, but he was humble. So he cared more about, well, how are you? And, nobody needs to pay attention to me. Tell me what's going on with you. And it exhausted him to talk about himself. And he was just fun. I was hanging out with one of his childhood friends and their family last night, and the friend was playing little pranks like they always do with his kids and his wife and my kids and all of that, and just being downright ridiculously youthful. And it adds that fun element that I don't necessarily have all the time. I did when I was with him, and it brought that out in me, and I think I miss that a lot, that fun, youthful energy that's just silly. and for this big burly man who had experienced so much trauma and life and death and had the weight of the world on his shoulders, but to still have that youthfulness and that levity and the playing with the kids, to me, that's part of what made him just really, really special. And I also think with all these, when we're talking about gun control, all these things, there are people that get mad, and there are people that get almost, just so angry and so passionate and all of that. And it was almost shocking how Chris might feel some of those things and say some of those things flippantly, but if you really talk to him about it, he had the heart, a true, humble, godly heart to say, it's okay for them to think that way. It's okay for them to feel that way. And I think that's something that a lot more of us could do, is say, it's okay for you not to agree with me. I'm not going to consider you to be a moron because of it. Just listen a little bit, hear what they're saying, and say that's okay, and be confident in how you feel. Be confident enough to change if you need to. Maybe keep your core unless you thought it through and your core changes, but be okay with this kind of rough, smoothing out some of our own rough edges too.
You were talking about Chris's humility. I remember hearing you speak before about he only wrote the book American Sniper because he was concerned that somebody else was going to write it and that his brothers in arms weren't going to get the credit they deserved. Is that right?
That's absolutely true. And I mean, this man resisted telling his story for years. And it wasn't until somebody else was writing chapters. I mean, it wasn't just the idea that somebody was going to write it. They were actually in the process of writing and had a few chapters done before he said, oh, man, because I think the worst thing to him would be if somebody had written the book and called him the legend and the greatest sniper and talked about all these heroics and not talked about the other people and not talked about his shortcomings and his humanity and his frailties and all those things. That would have been something didn't want to carry for sure, and would have been pretty devastating to him. So for him to do it his own way and to give credit and to not want to keep the profits from it either, it was all part of this thing saying, this isn't about me. The story's going to be told. Let's be clear. It's not about me.
Was he a very political person?
He had very strong political views, and we talked sometimes about who he could support, would he want to support. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, it didn't interest him at the time, but our conversations would suggest that he would have been open to not necessarily running for office, but open to helping. I think some, in the way that I'm doing it, I think it's very similar to what he would have done. Meaning, if there is a certain person that you really know inside and out and you feel you can vouch for, then you do it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's not really an area that you want to get into. Or if there's a certain issue that you feel like maybe there's something to be said, maybe you could have some, benefit some part of it, then do it. But not ever just to be in it or for the thrill of being in it. I don't think that interested him, right. And I know it doesn't me.
I know you're very passionate about a lot of different issues. You're maybe saying that doesn't translate into actual politics, but just curious, is there anybody out there right now that you would want to openly support for, say, president in 2016?
I feel like the politics, and going back to Chris too, it's not that each of us don't have our opinions, but it gets so convoluted and we miss the messages so much of who the people really are. And so this is, I know, a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but there isn't somebody that I could say right now, this is the person. But what I would love is for all of us to look at the character of the person that we're voting for. That, to me, would be the greatest change we could make in this country, whether it's Democrat, Libertarian, Republican. Could we all care a little bit more about the character of the person that we're voting for? Mm-hmm. And I feel like somehow along the way, we're losing that because we're just thinking, they're all a mess. What's the lesser of two evils? Or, Yeah, so what? So they lie, so they cheat, so they do this, so they do that. Big deal. And to me, I just feel like, why is that not a big deal when you're talking about somebody who leads a country? Nobody's going to make all of the decisions that you are going to agree with. Nobody. But if you can at least know that their character is good and that they're going to be as honest as any person could be, and they're going to have integrity in a broken system, no matter how hard that is, why is that not the most important thing to us? I think that would change more of our broken system than anything.
I think you're right. And from my point of view and from other outsiders' point of view, all those words that you were talking about, integrity, character, those are words so many people would use to describe you and Chris.
Thank you.
And I just open it up. If there's anything else you'd like to share, if Chris were here, what would he want to share that we haven't talked about?
He'd want to share a beer with you. That's
share
what Chris
beer?
would share a beer.
I would love that too.
He'd probably have something, Chris would probably have something funny to say, something just a little bit, outside the norm, especially for you being a young guy. And he'd probably, honestly, outside of an interview, he'd probably just want to ask you about you and see, like, what are your interests? What do you like doing? And, where you're going in this world would be more interesting to him than saying anything different.
You're both such special people, and your family so special. I think in closing, I just want to thank you and, of course, Chris and your whole family for all the sacrifices. People don't know the sacrifices that you and other military families have to make. So on behalf of the ones that do understand, thank you so much. Regular people like us are so grateful. I want to mention the books to our audience. If you haven't read the books, if you haven't seen the movie, do it. Support the Kyle family. Support other military families. Go the extra mile for them because they certainly go the extra mile for us. So Taya, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.